1969 Corvette. David would eventually tell police, quote, "Dean jumped up and said, 'I'm just having some fun,' and he promised me a car if I kept quiet. Later, he admitted he killed them and bought me a Corvette," end quote. Dean then offered him $200 anytime he lured a teen boy back to his residence. David would make good on that offer in December when he lured two friends of his, James Glass and Danny Yates, both 14 years old, to Dean's apartment. They were told that Dean was having an early birthday party, and Danny had met Dean previously. Both the teenage boys ended up tied to the torture rack and sodomized. Dean strangled both boys and hid their bodies in a boat shed that he had rented. Dean's appetite for inflicting pain continued to rise. He was known to rip out pubic hairs with pliers, insert glass rods into the victim's urethra, and then Dean's appetite for inflicting pain continued to rise. He was known to rip out pubic hairs with pliers, insert glass rods into the victim's urethra, and then break the glass while it was in their penis, and shove large rubber dildos into their anuses. Dean would eventually start castrating his victims while they were alive and burying their genitals next to their bodies. Throughout most of 1971, David Brooks and Dean Corll would continue to lure teenage boys back to Dean's residence, where he would rape and kill them. Brothers, 15-year-old Donald Waldrop and 13-year-old Jerry Waldrop, vanished on January 30th. 15-year-old Randall Harvey disappeared on March 9th. Then 16-year-old Gregory Winkle, who was the boyfriend of Randall's sister, went missing on May 29th. With Gregory, a 13-year-old boy named David Hillegeist also disappeared. On August 17th, 17-year-old Reuben Haney called his mother to let her know he was staying with his friend, David Brooks. He was never seen again. During his confession to the police, David claimed that sometime in the winter of 1971, he and Corll abducted two more teenage boys. They brought them back to the apartment that Dean had just moved into, and the boys were held there for about 4 days. Dean killed the boys and disposed of their bodies. Their identities have never been uncovered. It goes without saying that the parents of the missing boys would begin to search for their children. Many went to the police but didn't receive any help. The police assumed the missing boys were runaways and said that there was nothing that they could do. The parents were on their own. 15-year-old Elmer Wayne Henley, who went by Wayne, was one of David Hillegeist's best friends. He helped David's parents hang missing posters around the neighborhood. He would eventually meet David Brooks, who brought him back to Dean's apartment to be his next victim. However, Dean liked Wayne and thought he would make a good accomplice. He gave him the same offer he had previously given David, $200 for every young boy he lured back to the apartment. Dean told him that the boys would be sold to a sex slave ring. Wayne didn't take Dean up on his offer at first, but when his family fell on hard times, he gave in. At the beginning of 1972, Wayne lured a teenage boy to Dean's apartment and collected his $200. It's reported that neither Wayne nor David ever collected the $200 bounty outside of their first deliveries. It wasn't long before Wayne realized what was really going on, but he continued to assist the killer, obtaining and disposing of victims. According to David's confession, Wayne even killed some of the boys himself. 1972 was an especially deadly year for young boys in the Houston Heights area. The trio would go on to abduct, rape, and murder at least 11 teenage boys that year. 18-year-old Willard Rusty Branch went missing on February 9th. It wasn't until his sister identified his body in 1985 that he was finally connected to Dean Corll. Rusty's father, a Houston police officer, would die of a heart attack while searching for his boy just weeks after his disappearance. 18-year-old Frank Aguirre disappeared on March 24th. On April 20th, 17-year-old Mark Scott was forced to write a letter to his family explaining that he had received a job in Austin before being strangled by the Candyman. 16-year-old Johnny DeLome and 17-year-old Billy Balch, who was a former employee of the Corll Candy Company, went missing on May 21st. Billy was also forced to write a letter to his family explaining that he and Johnny had found jobs in Madisonville. 17-year-old Steven Sickman went missing on July 19th. 19-year-old Roy Bunton never made it to work on August 21st. 14-year-old Wally Simoneau and 13-year-old Richard Hembry were last seen on October 2nd. Wally managed to get a call into his mother before the call was cut off, and the boys were never seen again. 19-year-old Richard Kepner disappeared on November 15th. The trio were burying bodies at 3 different locations. The boat shed that was rented out by Dean, an area near Lake Sam Rayburn, and a beach on the Bolivar Peninsula. During that year, one boy, 19-year-old Billy Rittinger, was taken to Dean's house, strapped to the torture board, and raped. David told police that he managed to convince Dean to release Billy, and Dean agreed. The young man never went to police, and it's speculated that Billy may have been more involved with Dean than he made it seem, but nobody really knows. The trio were burying bodies at 3 different locations. The boat shed that was rented out by Dean, an area near Lake Sam Rayburn, and a beach on the Bolivar Peninsula. During that year, one boy, 19-year-old Billy Rittinger, was taken to Dean's house, strapped to the torture board, and raped. David told police that he managed to convince Dean to release Billy, and Dean agreed. The young man never went to police, and it's speculated that Billy may have been more involved with Dean than he made it seem, but nobody really knows. Dean only had one victim at the beginning of 1973. On February 1st, he killed 17-year-old Joseph Lyles without the assistance of Wayne or David. Soon after, he was diagnosed with hydrocele. This is a condition where fluid builds up in the scrotum, causing swelling. It's thought to the torture board, and raped. David told police that he managed to convince Dean to release Billy, and Dean agreed. The young man never went to police, and it's speculated area near Lake Sam Rayburn, and a beach on the Bolivar Peninsula. During that year, one boy, 19-year-old Billy Rittinger, was taken to Dean's house, strapped to the torture board, and raped. David told police that he managed to convince Dean to release Billy, and Dean agreed. The young man never went to police, and it's speculated that Billy may have been more involved with Dean than he made it seem, but nobody really knows. Dean only had one victim at the beginning of 1973. On February 1st, he killed 17-year-old Joseph Lyles without the assistance of Wayne or David. Soon after, he was diagnosed with hydrocele. This is a condition where fluid builds up in the scrotum, causing swelling. It's thought that this may have slowed down Dean's appetite for killing. In March, he moved to his father's old house back in Pasadena, Texas. Dean had moved around a lot during the few years he was killing boys. He never wanted neighbors to get too suspicious, but the house in Pasadena gave him a new level of stability, and it's believed that Dean would have eventually built an entire torture room if he had lived longer. At the beginning of the year, Wayne moved to try to enlist in the United States Navy, but was turned down due to not having completed high school. He wanted to get away from Dean, but he was afraid that the monster would go after his younger brothers, so he returned to Houston. Dean had already expressed interest in them, and Wayne couldn't let that happen. By June, Wayne was in town, Dean was healed, and the trio were back on the prowl. The group would abduct and kill 2 boys in June. 15-year-old Billy Lawrence called his father on June 4th and told him he was going fishing with some friends for a few days. Then Billy's father got a postcard in the mail that read, quote, "Dear Daddy, I have decided to go to Austin because I've got a good job offer. I am sorry that I decided to leave, but I just had to go. P.S. I will be back in late August. Hope you understand, but I had to go. Daddy, I hope you know I love you. Your son, Billy." End quote. The boy was forced to write the note by Dean before he was held in the house for 3 days, being raped and tortured. 20-year-old Raymond Blackburn was the oldest victim of Dean Corll. He vanished on June 15th while he was hitchhiking from Houston to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where he was going to see his newborn baby. Either Dean's lust for pain, "I will be back in late August. Hope you understand, but I had to go. Daddy, I hope you know I love you. Your son, Billy." End quote. The boy was forced to write the note by Dean before he was held in the house for 3 days, being raped and tortured. 20-year-old Raymond Blackburn was the oldest victim of Dean Corll. He vanished on June 15th while he was hitchhiking from Houston to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where he was going to see his newborn baby. Either Dean's lust for pain was growing, or he was trying to catch up for lost time while he was sick, because in July he killed 5 more boys. One of the boys was 15-year-old Michael Balch, who was the younger brother of one of Dean's victims from the previous year. 15-year-old Homer Garcia went missing on July 7th. John Sellers was a 17-year-old boy who went missing on July 12th. Michael Balch, brother of Billy Balch, disappeared on July 19th. 18-year-old Marty Jones and 17-year-old Charles Cobble were picked up by one of the men and taken to Dean's house. Charles made a friend, more boys. One of the boys was 15-year-old Michael Balch, who was the younger brother of one of Dean's victims from the previous year. 15-year-old Homer Garcia went missing on July 7th. John Sellers was a 17-year-old boy who went missing on July 12th. Michael Balch, brother of Billy Balch, disappeared on July 19th. 18-year-old Marty Jones and 17-year-old Charles Cobble were picked up by one of the men and taken to Dean's house. Charles made a frantic phone call to his father on July 25th, saying he had been kidnapped by drug dealers and that neither boy was ever seen again. In the middle of July, David Brooks married his pregnant fiancée and they moved to an apartment on the outside of Houston Heights. This left Wayne as Dean's sole accomplice, but Wayne was growing tired of his demanding partner. 13-year-old James Trey Mala was last seen riding his bike on August 3rd. He had planned to take his girlfriend to see a movie and wanted to cash in the bottles he had collected in order to pay for the date. He told his mother he wouldn't be gone long and rode his bike down the road. At some point, Dean pulled up to the boy in his van and told him he had a lot more bottles at his house than he could have. Once back at the house, the men offered to let him stay and hang out. He called home to ask if he could hang out at Dean's house, but his father said no and told him he had 20 minutes to get home. He never returned. On August 8, 1973, Wayne brought a couple of friends back to Dean's house just to hang out. 19-year-old Timothy Curley and 15-year-old Rhonda Williams were not intended to be targets. Wayne just wanted to hang out, drink some alcohol, and huff some paint. You know, like teenagers do. Dean did not see it that way. He was angry with Wayne for bringing a girl back to his house and told him that he had ruined everything. Then the predator waited until they all passed out before tying them up in his bedroom. When Wayne woke up, he could feel Dean clamping the handcuffs onto his wrists. He begged Dean to calm down, but the man was incensed that a girl had been brought to his house. He promised Wayne that he was going to kill all three of them after he had his fun with Timothy. When he pulled out a gun and pressed it to Wayne's stomach, the teen boy had to think fast. He promised Dean that he would still help him kill and dispose of Timothy and Rhonda. Dean finally calmed down and agreed, freeing Wayne. At this point, Dean planned to rape Timothy, and he told Wayne to rape Rhonda. Wayne didn't want to rape and kill his friends, and he was frantically trying to figure out what to do. When Rhonda looked up at him and asked, quote, "Is this for real?" end quote, Wayne answered yes. The girl said, quote, "Well, aren't you going to do something?" end quote. This gave Wayne the push he needed. He grabbed the .22 revolver off of the bedroom dresser and pointed it at Dean. He yelled, quote, "You've gone far enough, Dean," end quote. Dean stepped closer to Wayne and taunted him. Quote, "You won't do it," end quote. But he was obviously wrong. Wayne pulled the trigger and shot Dean in the head.
Pero recuerda que mi talla a veces no hay.
Skull. About hard-headed, Wayne pulled the trigger 2 more
A una
times,
maleta.
Dean in the shoulder. The killer president ran out of the room, and Wayne unloaded the gun into Dean's back. The serial predator fell to the floor, completely naked, and didn't move. Wayne dialed 911 and told the operator, quote, "Y'all better come here right now. I just killed a man," end quote. When an officer arrived, he found 3 teenagers sitting on the porch, a pistol in the driveway, and a dead man inside the house.
18 years ago, police were called to this house in a suburb of Houston on what they thought was a routine homicide. What they found was the bullet-ridden body of Stephen Horn and a crying 17-year-old named Elmer Wayne Henley. Horn had been Henley's friend and mentor, and by killing him, Henley put an end to a 2-year torture and serial killing spree. One.
The articles in the house itself, you know, the boards, the handcuffs, and the tools they used for the torture, I knew that it was not a run-of-the-mill everyday shooting.
Wayne was taken to the police station where he unloaded his entire story. He told them everything. He told them about the abductions, the torture board, and the burial locations. He told them as many names as he could remember of the victims, and when police checked, many of them were boys who were reported missing.
Henley led the police through several killing fields where he and Pearl had disposed of their victims.
It started right here at this boat shed. Right over in that corner, there was a mound